Hey guys, Poro here with another Power Rankings video, and this time we are doing the LCK for the winter split of 2025. LCK is technically not finished yet. On paper, we only have 48 out of the 50 slots decided. DRX has not officially declared who their bot laner is going to be, and OK Bro currently has two different bot laners signed. They have both Bull and Hype. Although I think we have enough information that I'm going to go ahead and do the Power Rankings video anyways. I'm pretty sure that DRX is going to stick with Teddy at this point, and I'm also pretty sure, based on the Kespa Cup, that OK Bro has decided to go with Hype. So if we assume all of that to be true, then we have 50 out of 50. But just keep in mind that I could be wrong, that OK Bro might play Bull, and that DRX might pick up a different bot laner. That being said, I do think that this split will be quite exciting. Usually the LCK has a problem of being extremely top heavy. Like usually we have a top 5 teams who are super good, and then the 6th place playoff team is kind of bad, and then the other 4 teams are just terrible. This time I don't really think it's like that. I think that realistically you have a very strong top 3, and then after that, kind of 4 through 8 are all pretty solid and could all make playoffs. So hopefully that means we'll have a more interesting season. Let's not waste time, let's get right into it. My 10th place team is FearX. They'll be fielding Clear and Raptor, who played for them last season, Vikla, who's coming from Rare Atom, Diable, who played for their Challengers team, and then Kellen, who's coming from DK, I guess technically their challenger team, although Kellen was really on their main roster for a good portion of the time that he spent there. Moham only really came in near the end. So right away the question that comes up is, why is FearX 10th when they have some returning members and they got a couple of decently named pickups and they finished 6th last year? This team made playoffs last year. Why are they all of a sudden all the way down in 10th? Well, the first reason is that the other bottom teams also happen to have some decent players this year. And then the other reason is that while yes, FearX did make playoffs, I do tend to think that that team was carried a little bit by Closer. Clear and Raptor were on that team, sure, but I think that Closer is doing most of the heavy lifting. I think that he was their main X factor, their main big carry who could step up in big moments. And looking at the changes, they really don't look all that inspiring. I mean, first of all, you're replacing Closer with Vikla, who, while he did look decent on KT a few years ago, in recent memory, his career has not been that good. He went to a FlyQuest super team, completely bombed the super team, pretty much single-handedly made that team terrible. Then he went to Rare Atom, looked, I guess, okay, but Rare Atom ended up finishing in, I think, 11th, 13th, so not too great there. I am not very inspired by this pick. Also, another thing to consider is that all of the time that Vikla spent on KT, he was playing with Cuz. And one thing about Cuz is that Cuz is one of those junglers who will make his teammates look better when he plays. He's one of those junglers who's really good at playing around his teammates, playing through his lanes. Then you look at their bot lane, they're bringing up Diable. I think this change is like fine. FearX's Challengers team wasn't that amazing or anything. Diable was decent. To be fair, I didn't watch them that much. I only saw the games that they played against T1's Challenger team. But in those games, I was not very impressed. And then you have Kellen. Now, I know that Kellen has a little bit of a meme status surrounding him where people kind of think that he sucks because he tends to run it down in big moments sometimes, but overall, I actually do think that he's a decent support. I think he certainly has big moments where he'll just make the most disgusting play you've ever seen in your life. But I also think that he's an LCK level support who can hang in there with the mid-tier Korean supports who are out there. At the end of the day, though, I'm just not seeing how this team is supposed to play. I don't think that any of the 4 members who are in carry positions can actually carry a game against top-level players. I'll be interested to see who this team actually decides to funnel resources into, or if it's just going to become one of those teams where just nothing happens and then they lose peacefully every single game. In 9th, I've got Nongshim, who have made a couple of pretty big changes. They decided to keep Sylvie and Jiwoo, but they swapped out their support for Lehens, and they swapped out their top laner for Kingin, both of which were probably very big changes. Kingin is a little bit of a question mark for me. I think that Din Din was decent enough. I don't know if he needed to be subbed out. Kingin can look really, really good sometimes. I mean, like, obviously he looked great on DRX and Worlds at 2022, and he looked fine on D plus last year, I guess. But he also has some extremely inconsistent splits. I don't really have faith that he can become a reliable carry for them. And while I do think that Lehens is really good, even though he did have a bit of a weaker Worlds performance this year, I don't really see how he's going to be able to lift this team up. When you look at the rest of their team, I mean, like, Sylvie and Jiwoo were on a very uninspiring Nongshim roster. And then, of course, the elephant in the room is that they decided to go with EDG's mid laner, Fisher. And if I have to say one thing about Fisher, it's that he is not very good. In fact, I would go as far as to say that I am absolutely shocked that he is in the LCK at all. I don't even know if Fisher could really hold up in LCK challengers, let alone a main team. I will be very curious to see if Fisher just crashes and burns against every single other mid laner in the league. Who knows, maybe he can trade lanes with Vikla or something. But yeah, even though you have a pretty decent top laner and a solid support, I think that the rest of the pieces are just not strong enough to make a splash in the LCK this season. Now with the two teams that I really don't think ever had a shot at making playoffs out of the way, we can finally start to talk about some of the interesting teams, and at the bottom of the interesting teams in 8th, I have Kwangdong Freaks. This roster, I have a very similar opinion to it as I do to the KC roster from LEC, where I really like the roster. I hope that this roster sticks together for multiple seasons, but I think it's a little bit too soon for them, and I don't think that they'll perform that amazingly this split. I think this is the type of roster where you keep them together for 2 years and maybe they can make Worlds or something. The ceiling looks really high for a team like this. Dudu is a very solid top laner. I know that for a little bit people were thinking that maybe he could become the next big top laner of the LCK. I think that ship has sailed a little bit. I think that Dudu's kind of topped out. We know how good he's going to be. And you know, he's pretty good. I don't think that he's ever going to rank among the top tier top laners of the LCK, but I think that he definitely deserves the spot. I think he's a solid top laner. The rest of the players are all very inconsistent and have very high potential ceilings. Kyoshik has had some very uninspiring seasons, but he had a solid turnaround. He had an amazing year at TL. So good, in fact, that KT decided to pick him back up into the LCK again. And then the other thing to remember is that even though Kyoshik has been around for a while, since 2020 he made Worlds, he's still a very young player. Like, he still has a lot of room to potentially grow. And in fact, I think that we are seeing that growth as we speak. I think that mechanically, the sky is the limit for this guy. Same thing for Berserker. He might not have looked that good on C9 last split, but he has been in the past the best player in the entirety of the LCS. Life is another player who can bring a lot of firepower. He's very mediocre sometimes, but every once in a while he'll randomly just have a game where he carries the entire game from start to finish. And then of course you have Bulldog, who is another big name. A lot of people think that this guy is going to be a really good mid laner in the future. I'm still a little bit skeptical. I want to see how he does this split. Like I mentioned with Vikla, Bulldog had the ability to play with Cuz. In Bulldog's best split, he was playing with Cuz. I will be curious to see how Bulldog does when he is not playing with a jungler who is of that kind of like play-through lane archetype. So to recap, I think that this team has one very solid player and then 4 players who are kind of coin flips, could be hit or miss. I think that this team will look a little bit rough at first because of that, but I would not be surprised if by the time summer rolls around, they are a real playoffs contender, maybe vying for a world slot. In 7th, as of right now, I have DRX. I do want to preface this by saying that they are only above KDF for me by a small margin. If DRX ends up going with a different AD carry other than Teddy, I could see myself moving them down to 8th. That being said, I really like what DRX did with their offseason. They're keeping Sponge, who did look fairly promising last year, and then they also have backup jungler Juhan, which is never a bad backup jungler to have. For their mid, they're swapping Setab with Yukal. Now, I actually didn't dislike Setab. I thought that he showed some potential, but I mean, like, if Yukal is willing to go to your team, you're gonna take it. Yukal recently played on Thunder Talk, and for me, even though Thunder Talk did kind of have a weak few splits, they were one of the more exciting teams for me to watch. And apart from their bot laner 1xN, I think that Yukal was definitely the other best player on that team. I feel like a lot of people just underrate Yukal in general. I feel like this guy still has a lot to give. I would not be surprised if Yukal ends up being a top 5 mid laner in the LCK this year. Pleader for Andil is completely fine. I think that Andil is pretty solid. And while Rich for Rascal might seem a little bit questionable at first, I mean, like, Rascal's pretty solid in my opinion, I do like the pickup at the end of the day. I think that Rich is one of those X-Factor players who, while he might be inconsistent sometimes, there will be other games where he just provides a tremendous impact even if he's playing against top-level enemy teams. I could definitely see this team just randomly beating one of the top level teams in a game or two here or there. I also think that when you have players like UCal and Teddy on your team, you're going to have a solid level of consistency that will allow you to just play better than some of the other bottom level teams. In sixth, I've got KT. I think at a first glance, when you just look at the roster's first impression, you would think for sure that KT is a top 5 team. BDD, historically one of the best LCK mid laners of all time. You have Cuz, who I've been hyping up for pretty much the entirety of the video. And Perfect showed flashes of being pretty decent last year. I also think that swapping Beryl for Wei is completely fine. I think that Wei is a solid player. That said, I have some big question marks with this team. The first one is going with Dokdom. Dokdom has had very good splits in the past, specifically when he was on Nongshim way back when the team randomly went 12-6 and tied for first. Can we talk about that, by the way? That team had Rich, Peanut, Gory, Dokdom, and Kellen, and they tied for first in regular season. Imagine telling somebody that in 2025. That is insane. That roster should not have even gone top 5. I guess that just goes to show how good Peanut is. But anyways, Dokdom has looked kinda garbage for these last few years. He has an insanely good Ashe, and then everything else he's kinda mediocre. So I have some question marks about Dokdom's performance, and I also have question marks around Perfect's performance. As one of my friends said, Perfect was really good until he wasn't. If Perfect starts this year the way that he ended last year, this team will not look very good. I think that their floor is pretty high. I mean, like when you have BDD and Cuz on a team, they can only be so bad. But some of the teams that I have above them have a little bit of a higher upside that I'm willing to take a chance on for my ranking list. One of those teams is D plus Kia, who I have in 5th. They made 2 changes, swapping Moham for Beryl and Kingin for Siwoo. Now, I will go on record and say that I am the #1 Beryl hater of all time, but I will say, I do think that this is an upgrade. I think that Moham was not good and not an LCK level support. And even though I also think that Beryl is, like, not very good, you can't argue with the fact that he just keeps on placing top level year after year. He just has this flair to him where he's a disgusting inter, but also everything just works out for him in the end. He's paired with Aiming, who's probably the 15th best player in the LCK. And they've got Showmaker, who, while he has been pretty inconsistent lately, he's still Showmaker. He'll still randomly just have insane games every now and then. And the D+'s topside is very promising to me. I thought Lucid looked really good last year. And their other pickup, Siwoo, is a player that I've watched a fair amount. I watched some of his Challengers games, was very impressed. And then recently, I watched him in the Kespa Cup, and it seems like he might have an identity as this team's new carry. Maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but Siwoo's kind of giving me flashes of the next Nuggery, potentially. I think swapping Kingin for Siwoo will be a strict upgrade for this team in the long run. I don't know if it'll be an upgrade right away, but I think that Siwoo definitely adds a level of threat to this team that they didn't have before, because now the team can play for either top side or bot side and have a reliable carry there. I'll be excited to see how Siwoo and Lucid develop. I'll be excited to see if Beryl continues to run it down but then just win anyway. And Showmaker is one of my favorite players of all time. Even if he has not been looking good lately, I still have faith that this guy can be a top-level mid laner. And while I'm talking about how much I think D+, and KT, and DRX, and KDF have promising rosters, there's one team that a lot of people are probably going, okay, where the hell are they? Why have you not mentioned them yet? What is happening? And that team is my 4th place team, OK Bro. Now, before everybody freaks out and tells me that this is like the dumbest placement on a list ever, hear me out. I would agree with you. When I first saw all of the changes, I thought that this team was going to be like a 7th, 8th place team. Let's just look at the changes objectively for a second here. They're keeping Poyu, who was like okay at best. They're keeping Morgan, who at one point was the worst top laner in the entire LCK, although he has looked better and better as the years have gone on. They swapped Karis with Closer, who I think is strictly an upgrade. They're swapping MV with Bull and Hype. Bull was a bot laner who played a little bit in the LCK last year and did not look very good. And they're swapping out Youngjae with Hambak. Now at first, you probably look at all the changes and you go, okay, maybe they upgraded the roster a little bit, but it's not going to be crazy or anything. However, there are a few signs right out of the gate that this team might be bigger than what they appear on paper, which is that the 2 Challengers players that they recruited, Hambak and Hype, were both on KT Challengers who won the entirety of the league. Not only that, but Hambak and Hype were some of the driving force behind why that KT team looked so good. Hype in particular, I think is going to be very good. I think he's a very promising player. The other big thing, and I must stress that this is huge and is probably the entirety of the reason why I have this team as high as I do, is because of how they played in the Kespa Cup. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's the Kespa Cup. How serious can it be? And I'm here to tell you that the Kespa Cup is definitely a serious tournament. OK Bro flat out won the tournament, and they beat D Plus 3-1 in finals. Now you might be saying, okay, why does this matter? The last time that we saw the Kespa Cup, all of the teams just sent in their academy rosters and it was kind of a joke of a tournament. Sure, I get you. But when you look at the teams that were sent to the Kespa Cup this year, they were serious teams. These players and these orgs did not want to lose this tournament. Gen G sent Keen, Canyon, and Chovy, and although they didn't play Chovy in all of the games, they at least sent him, and Keen and Canyon played in all of the games. T1 sent Owner and Gumayusi. DK and Nongshim sent their full rosters. Life sent Zeka, Viper, and Delight. And then the other thing to take note of is that when you look at the history of the Kespa Cup, apart from 2021, the Kespa Cup is eerily accurate when it comes to predicting which teams will do well in the upcoming season. In 2017 all the way through 2020, the teams that top cut the Kespa Cup were basically the same teams that ended up top cutting the LCK that next season. And this year, OK Bro sent their full team and performed exceptionally well. They went 3-2 in groups, but it has an asterisk on it because one of their losses, they tried playing Bull, it really didn't work. After that one day of playing Bull, they ended up swapping to Hype for the rest of the tournament, and from there, they just kind of won everything. They beat the HLE team that had their full bot side of Zeka, Viper, Delight, and then over the course of the tournament, they 4-1'd D plus Kia. I do not know how in good faith I can actually put the D plus Kia roster ahead of the OK Bro roster if they are going to get 4-1'd by them. Both teams were playing their full rosters. I feel like it would be disingenuous of me to just put one ahead of the other who has proven that they cannot beat them. Now, I actually did go and watch the games, and I will say that in at least 2 of the games in finals, D Plus did have a decent lead in the game, and that they just ended up throwing it. But I also think that's a testament to the fact that OK Bro has a good mental, and they won't give up, and they'll continue to look for angles to win the game. But overall from the tournament, I had 2 main takeaways when I was watching OK Bro's team. The first one is that Morgan might actually be pretty good. He ended up taking home Finals MVP. He looked really good across the entirety of the tournament. And this is a player who has shown promise in the past. He's not always delivered on that promise, but he shows flashes of brilliance here and there. And if he can play in the LCK like he played in the Kespa Cup, he'll be really good. And then the other key takeaway is that Hype was insane. He looked so good. I might be jumping the gun here, but Hype looked like the type of player that you could build your entire team around. I think that this team is going to be one of those teams that is greater than the sum of their parts. I think that their parts aren't even that bad. I am so ready to be proven wrong and then just get the classic OK Bro 10th place finish, can't win a single game. But I will be greatly looking forward to watching every single one of this team's matches. I think this team has a real shot to shock people. Now we get to the big top 3. I think that this is going to be everybody's top 3. Even if these 3 teams don't end up finishing in the top 3, I think it would be quite foolish to not have them as 1, 2, and 3 in your power rankings. Somewhere in any order, doesn't really matter. But I think these guys have to be in your top 3. In 3rd place, I have T1. Yes, I know that they just got back from winning their 2nd straight Worlds Championship. And yes, they are keeping 4 of their members, but they made one change, and it was Zeus for Doran. Do I think this is a downgrade? Yes. Does T1 think this is a downgrade? From what I have heard, also yes. Do I think this is as big of a downgrade as everybody is making it out to be? No. I think that Doran is one of the most disrespected players in the LCK. Is he a horrible inter who will just randomly lose you the game sometimes? Yes. Is he a player where when he plays against somebody who is better than him, he will completely fold and be useless? Yes. Is he a bottom half LCK top laner? No. And in fact, I do not think that Doran has been a bottom half LCK top laner for the last multiple years. This guy has been solid, and there have been moments where he's shown up before. There have been multiple finals against T1 where Doran was just the better top laner than Zeus in the series. And while sure, you would always take top laners like Zeus or Keen over him, I think that there's a solid argument that you would take Doran over just about anyone else. He is a known quantity. You know what you are going to get when you put him on your team, and what you are going to get is a fairly solid top laner. I think T1 will look fine. The main reason why I have them in third is because I just think that the two rosters ahead of them made some really good changes. Talking about T1 specifically, I'm still not in love with this team. I know that they made 3 straight Worlds Finals. I know that they won the last 2. But this team, in my opinion, is still just not that consistent. I think that their most consistent player across all these years has been Gumayusi. I think Gumayusi is the top level bot laner. But everyone else has had stretches of being pretty good and also pretty bad. There have been splits where owners felt invisible. There have also been splits where owner's been the best jungler in the world. There have been splits where carry is the best in the world. But there are also splits where it's more of an engage meta and carry becomes just a decent support. And yes, Faker may have shown up in World Finals, but to be honest, he did not show up for the rest of the year. And in fact, I think that Faker was a huge liability to the team for multiple occasions. Specifically at MSI, other teams found out that Faker was a huge draft liability for T1, and pretty much every single pick ban phase was just teams abusing Faker's small champion pool, forcing him on something that he wasn't that good at, abusing him in lane, and then using that as an angle to potentially win their games. I think that Faker is very good at specific champions. I think he's a very good playmaker, but he definitely struggles. I think that he struggled very heavily with the AD mid meta that we had for pretty much the entirety of summer. I think that's a big reason why T1 struggled in summer. I think that a lot of people forget that. T1 almost did not even qualify for Worlds in summer. They had to qualify through the regional finals. This team does not have a perfect track record, and I don't think that they're just a shoe-in to win again. In second, I've got Gen.G. They're keeping Keen, Canyon, and Chovy. Chovy was the best player all year. Canyon was one of the best junglers all year. Keen was one of the best top laners all year. I think there's an argument for both Keen and Canyon that they were the best players in their respective roles. And their big pickup this offseason is that they're swapping out Pays for Ruler. I think this is a massive upgrade. Ever since Ruler has gone to the LPL, he has been up there as either the best or a top 2 AD carry in the league. I think there's a small argument that there was a split where you could say that Elk and Jackie Love were better, but other than that, Ruler has always been either the best or the second best. Even though JDG did not qualify for Worlds, Ruler's form did not fall off at all. Them not qualifying was more on the backs of the other members. I think Ruler will come into the LCK and be just as dominant as he always has been. Their other pickup, Duro, we did see him play in the LCK for FearX a little bit. He's obviously not some insane support talent who's going to blow your mind, but I think that when you have a team with parts as consistent as Keen, Canyon, Chovy, and Ruler, I think you can put pretty much any support on that team that's not named, I don't know, Moham, and you'll probably be fine. That said, the existence of Duro does make me want to put Gen.G number 2, just because I think that the number 1 team has put together such a solid roster. And that team is HLE, the reigning LCK champions. They made one change, swapping Doran for Zeus, and in my eyes, this is a big upgrade. They're keeping the rest of their core, which I think is a fantastic choice. Viper Delight has been the best bot lane duo in the world. Zeka has recaptured most of the glory that he had in 2022. He looks very solid. You have Peanut, who has always been notoriously very successful. I used to say that I wasn't a big fan of Peanut. I used to be very anti-Peanut. I thought that he would make a lot of weird decisions in games. I thought that mechanically he was not on par with the other junglers. But as the years have gone on, I've come to respect Peanut more and more. I feel like the more I understand jungle as a role, the better Peanut actually gets to me. Peanut is very good and making sure that the game state is stable and that the game is played out the way that it should be played out based on the comps. He is a fantastic jungler at playing through his lanes and making his laners look as good as possible, and I think that this is the exact type of jungler that Zeus will be fantastic with. Zeus is a top laner who has an extremely high upside, but has also been somewhat inconsistent in the past. I think a jungler like Peanut is really good at taking that downside or that floor and bringing it up to a noticeable degree while making sure that ceiling is met and stands out. Zeus's ceiling is the best top laner in the world. There are some really good top laners right now. Keen is really good. Bin is really good. Despite 369 having a weaker Worlds, I still think that he's really good. Zeus has moments where he is head and shoulders above all of them. He also has moments where he's randomly just getting solo killed 3 times by Doran. But I think overall, these 3 lanes are the perfect Peanut lanes. If there was ever going to be a year that Peanut was going to win Worlds, this is the team that he's going to do it with. Zeus, Zeka, Viper, and Delight all have insanely high ceilings and could all be the best performing players in their role in the world at any given time. I have a lot of faith in this team. I think If Peanut can't win with this team, he's not going to win with any team. I would love to see Peanut prove that he has what it takes to bring home an international title like this. The only thing he is really missing on his resume at this point is a world title, and although I may have been a Peanut hater in the past, I have to admit that I am rooting for him. And with that, that'll do it. Those are my LCK rankings this year. Like I said, I think you have the clear top 3. Life, Genji, and T1. I think those are the teams that will finish in the top 3. While I do think that Life will be first and Genji will be second, I would not be surprised to see it go in any order. After that, I think 4 through 8 are your teams that are contesting playoffs. There are a lot of teams that I'm really excited for. I think OKBro, DRX, and KDF have all assembled rosters that are going to be interesting to watch and have potentially really high upsides. I think KT will be pretty solid no matter what, and I think that D Plus has a new exciting topside that could prove to be the topside of the future. As for the bottom 2 teams, better luck next year, I guess. After this, I'm planning on doing the LTA North. LTA North is pretty much done. We have 39 out of 40 players. We're just waiting to see if Dignitas is gonna go with Spica. If we don't hear about this for the next couple of days, I'm just going to assume that Dignitas is keeping Spica, and I'll make the list as if that's what's happening. I'm not really seeing what the other potential options would be at this point. I don't know, maybe there's a world that like Dignitas tries to sign Bo or something, because I know that Bo is teamless currently. But yeah, expect that soon. As for the other 3 regions, the LTA South, the LPL, and the LCP, none of those 3 are really that close to being done. We've heard a few more things, but nothing too crazy. But yeah, that's it for this time. I will see you all for the LTA North video.